This is Barrie, a city constantly evolving. At any time, a whole host of pressures challenge the intricate tapestry of city government. In this series, we will explore the priorities deemed essential for progress, even if they don't always inspire unanimous applause. Join me each week for a candid conversation with a member of our city government as we uncover the stories behind the scenes of Barrie, a city on the move. Welcome to Barrie, City on the Move. My name's Arif Khan, and it's my pleasure to be joining you wherever you're receiving this content, whether it's at home on cable or online on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. It's a pleasure to be with you. In this series, we look to give some insight to the public, an inside look at what happens at City Hall, a look at governance, a look at operations, also sometimes a conversation with partners who help to provide you and me as residents a greater quality of life in the city of Barrie. Today, it's an appropriate time to have a conversation about winter control, and in order to have that conversation, Dave Friary, who's the Director of Operations with the City of Barrie, has agreed to join me, and we're going to talk all things winter. So welcome, Dave, and thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's been maybe about a year since we had this conversation, as seasonally it just makes sense.
Yep.
Goal today, obviously, to find out what's new, what's going on, get caught up, but also a little bit of a reminder and a refresher to people in terms of what we can expect, how we can manage our expectations in terms of how winter control operations really functions, maybe provide some tips and things to do. There are some new things on our minds as homeowners and residents and tenants, et cetera, with regard to changes to curbside collection and things like that that will likely be impacted in some way, shape, or form this season. So let's talk all things winter control, not just snow plowing itself. But in order to get started, maybe let's have a little bit of a what's happening in terms of preparation for winter. Where are you and your team at in terms of getting ready for our first snowfalls? And at this point in time to air, we've probably had our first one.
Yeah, and you know, November 15th is when winter control starts, ends April 15th. So, you know, we're ready to go now. You know, last year when we talked, we really had no idea we're going to get about twice the snow that we usually get. So, you know, our winter control and our annual budget starts in January. So we run from January to December 31st. And, you know, as I said, we've had all our contractors in already. We've calibrated the machines, so we have to make sure the exact amount of salt or sand comes out. So, you know, we're basically ready to go.
Excellent, and it's interesting, actually. That's really the first thing that you mentioned there, sort of caught my attention. I think it's fairly reasonable for many of us as residents to assume that your budget goes from November to April in terms of winter operations, but in fact it's quite opposite. It's aligned with the city's budget, which typically is getting discussed in October and November for a January 1 start. So we've already consumed much of, if not more than, maybe you can touch on that a little bit more as to the reasons why, your 2025 budget.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we've got about twice the amount of snowfall. So, you know, our typical budget, $6 million. You know, I can tell you right now we're about $9 million into our budget, and we still have November, December to go. So, you know, are we going to be over budget? Absolutely, but you know, the residents can be rest assured that we're not going to just stop plowing. We're going to be out there every day as needed, and you know, fingers crossed it doesn't snow as much as we had last year, but you know, with the snow squall setting up, anytime you get warm Great Lakes, so right now, you know, Georgian Bay and Lake Huron are at 10 degrees. Air temperatures at -5. Whenever you get about that 13-degree difference, sets up for squalls. You know, the next couple days, we're showing winds out of the northwest, so that's a perfect squall machine. So, you know, batten down the hatches, and here we go.
Excellent. So, you know, it is, as you said, rest assured, operations will continue. Many of us consume news, and we're not immune to receiving news and influence from our neighbors to the south. Many of us have had conversations and almost looked in sort of an interesting curiosity of how certain residents manage in certain municipalities and states south of the border, where they operate quite differently. If they don't have the money, they shut down the police service, or they turn off the lights, or they turn off the water. We're very different here. We have protocols in place to continue operations. So that's good to know, and I don't know how much of that's going to be a side piece dinner conversation, but it's good to know. Thankfully, we live here in Canada. Give us a bit of an idea in terms of what's the sort of the complement of your team, both from an equipment perspective as well as a staffing perspective?
So trucks, we've got about 53, and they're kind of in three different categories. There's fully dedicated plows, fully dedicated sanders, and combination units. And depending on what route these folks are running, you may have a different vehicle than say somebody the next street over. So with staff, we've got two full crews. We have a day crew and a night crew. We did that so we could sort of provide 24-hour-a-day service. So in the past, with smaller crews, you can only run your staff 13 hours a day. So legally, by MTO standards, when you're driving a truck, you have to stop and rest. So the way we've got it set up now, we've got two full crews, so we can run 24/7. And we have crews on the weekend that come in the same. Our contractors, when we rate the contracts, they have to provide 24-hour service as well. So, you know, at any given time, we could run those 53 vehicles, you know, all day, every day.
And so this is, Dave, this is a change from recent years or previous years where we used to say, you know, it's snowing, well, we have to give these people a legal, I mean, not only legally, but morally and ethically, we've got to give them a break, right? We don't want them killing anybody or themselves either. But
yeah, that's new, I guess, about 3 years ago.
Okay.
We started that, and, you know, for that exact reason. You know, residents expect 24-hour-a-day service. You know, people are working shifts, people are up, you know, in the middle of the night going to work, the same as us. So, you know, making sure that everybody can get around safely. We are bound by MTO standards as well. So, you know, we can't just leave the roads. You know, our levels of service, you can find them on our website. If you look at some of the arterial roads, the primary roads, you know, 3 centimeters, we send plows out. Residentials, it's about 5 centimeters, and you know we have different levels of service for each roadway, and you know we can discuss that as well. So they're, you know, the primary roadways are maintained to bare pavement. Residentials pack snow. So there's a couple of reasons we do that as well. So we don't want to put salt on everything, and you know it takes an awful lot of salt to melt the snow on the roadway once it gets packed down. And what we want to do is be environmentally friendly as we can, and you know, be as safe as we can. We draw our drinking water from the lake and wells around town. So the last thing we want to do is contaminate our water source as well.
So let's get into a little bit more of that, actually. Before we get started, give us an idea of how many actually linear kilometers of roadways we have.
Yep. So we got about 1,600 kilometers of roadway, 600 kilometers of sidewalks, you know, and then there's municipal parking lots and things like that. We also do the waterfront trail for folks to enjoy all year round. You know, it does take a lot of effort. It takes, we were talking about sand and salt. You know, last year was a bit of an anomaly. We put down about 30,000 tons of salt. Typically, it's only around 20, but you know the amount of snowfalls that we had and constantly snowing, we were just out there all the time.
So you actually had a number. You said on an average year you would anticipate X number of runs, and last year was different.
Yeah. So you know, 2023, 24. About 70 events. Last year we had 111 events. So what we're committed to doing as well is to try and use the least amount of salt as we can. So if you look at our data throughout the years, we're actually using less salt per kilometer than we've used in previous years. So although the city's growing, we're adding subdivisions and we're widening roadways all the time. So our lane kilometers that we have to maintain and the amount of salt we use is going up, but the way we look at it is the amount of salt per kilometer that we're using, and it's gone down from almost 1 ton per 2-lane kilometer to, I think we're down around half that now. Mm-hmm. So
one of the things that I'm thinking about is as much as you can prepare, and you said your crews are ready, and mm-hmm. you do prepare, and you maybe look at some historical data, and you're tracking some things. We'll talk about technology in a bit. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, aside from the Farmer's Almanac and maybe a bit of a
yep.
Doppler radar assist, you are in reaction mode to a certain degree.
Correct.
And many of the things that impact, I'm imagining, are not just did we get snow, but also the cycle of freeze and thaw. Is mm-hmm. that, would you say, is that cycle more of an impact than the snowfall itself?
It just depends. It's tougher to predict. Squalls are one of the toughest things to kind of deal with, because it just comes off of Georgian Bay, could set up in an hour, and next thing you know, you're getting hammered with 10, 20 centimeters. The freeze thaw, definitely a huge issue these days. We've had warmer than average temperatures, so we're into things, ponding, puddling, especially sidewalks. We'll get a lot of challenges with sidewalks getting icy. People don't like to, going out with, their strollers or, assisted mobility equipment. And, we do our best.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into some of that after the break. But before we go to break, just give me, you mentioned, obviously, we're stewards of the water, we're stewards of the land. You've got some relationships with other departments and mm-hmm. agencies that you work with, and you mentioned that we are using less salt than historically, yep. I guess, per kilometer.
Yep.
Just talk about a little bit of the different types of applications. When are we using salt versus sand versus brine, or whichever combination?
Yeah. The pre-wetting, the anti-icing, we like using that because what'll happen is you can put it down and it'll dry on the roadway. So it's not bouncing off the roadway like regular salt. It gives us a head start on the storm, and it gives us time to kind of get out there and do things, and it doesn't allow the ice to adhere to the pavement. Because once it gets adhered to it, it gets packed, then you get snowpack, and it gets difficult. But, in residentials, we use sand, arterials, primaries, salt.
Got it. Okay, fair enough. So when we come back from the break, some people love them, some people not so much. I'm not going to say hate. That's not necessarily a nice way of saying it, but the love-hate relationship, mm-hmm. if you will, with the plow. When we come back from the break, let's actually get into a little bit of maybe what you would implore residents to consider in that relationship with
yep.
the people who are doing the work to keep us safe. So on the other side of the break, more from Dave Friary, Director of Operations with the City of Barrie, and we'll be talking more about winter. And welcome back to Barrie City on the Move. Dave Friary and I are talking winter. We're talking about what to expect, and I think as we're watching this show right now, we've probably already had our first dusting and maybe a little bit more of snow. Let's get back into that conversation. Dave, so we've talked about how many roads we have, how many kilometers we have. We talked about some of the things that might seem obvious to some. Mm-hmm. I've been living here in the city for, 25, almost 30 years, and you'd think we'd get used to it by now, but it's always amazing the first snowfall. You see all the people who forgot. Mm-hmm. that winter does happen, and we forget to maybe put on our snow tires or prepare, be better prepared. Maybe even forgotten how to drive and how to maintain our pace, et cetera. So let's get into some maybe helpful tips or things that you've noticed. You've got, I think you said 53 pieces of equipment out there. You've got 2 shifts running full time, sometimes at night, and sometimes it's at night with almost like you're watching a Star Wars or Star Trek episode with the asteroid field going through you in snow. Not easy to see some things. Give us an idea of really what an ideal relationship looks like between drivers in terms of our patience, in terms of our driving habits, not only with your plow operators, but also with each other on the roads. How do we keep our roads safe?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. You just have patience. Take extra time. If you're going to go somewhere and you know it's going to take you 20 minutes to get there, set aside 25 minutes, a half hour. One thing you never want to do is try and pass a plow, especially on the right-hand side. They're huge pieces of machinery. They're hard to see out. They're hard to maneuver. They can't nimbly, turn, stop. It's, if we're out, the roads are icy. So, give yourself plenty of stopping distance. Snow tires, obvious. Windshield washer fluid, wiper blades. Make sure you're all set. If you're hearing that there's going to be a storm coming, squalls we have a squall warning, go out before, get any medication, diapers, baby formula, all those things. It's a lot of planning ahead. When you're having to shovel, nobody likes shoveling. What I like to do is I'll go out twice rather than do once when it's like 6 inches. So it's easier to push the snow around twice when it's only 3 inches. If you're looking out at your driveway from the house, pile snow on the right-hand side of your driveway. That way when the plow comes by, you're not going to get it all thrown in as well. Garbage days, try to put your trash on your side of the curb, because that the plows are going to come by and they're going to have to try and push the snow back to the curb, because that's where the stormwater infrastructure is, and you don't want the roadways narrowing. So there's all those things. It's just all about planning and
So I'm gonna plain English a few things a little bit, if you might. I heard what you said, by the way, about wanting to push things back to the curb. Just to paint the picture, if we just take a mental visual of our driveway and where it meets the road, that's where we've got the sewer grates, where the water and the runoff flows into those things. And oftentimes in the fall, they get some leaves, or they get some build-up around them, or they get the snow on them. Whose responsibility is it, by the way? Is it everyone's responsibility as a citizen of Canada, or in terms of, is there a legal responsibility as well?
No, ultimately it's the city's responsibility. So any issues, call Service Barrie. You can call it in, or you could do an online request. Your call will be logged, monitored, and they'll give you a tracking number. So if it's not done, you can follow up. Now, that being said, if somebody wants to sort of shovel around their storm drain, we get a lot of comments, well, we don't know where it is, things like that. One of the handiest tools is Google Street View. Go on Google Street View, punch in your house. If you have a storm drain in front of your house, it'll show up, because Google goes around during the summer months. So it'll almost show you exactly where it is. And if you want to do it, that's fine. If you can't, physically unable, you just, not bothered, then please call into the city if you notice any problems. So we don't want to have, the freeze thaws, the ponding in front of your house, large ice buildup. When that happens, it actually takes us longer to plow and try and break that bond between the asphalt and the ice. So, anything we can, proactively do or get to ahead of time, it helps us all out.
Absolutely. I mean, and rightfully so. There are people say, hey, we pay a lot of taxes in this city, and it is a lot. let's put it this way, I think we can all agree the cost of goods and services has escalated beyond the rate of many people's pay increases.
Yep.
And I think that that's a fair statement to
Yep.
make for certainly probably 3/4 of
Yep.
the population. However, it's also more expensive if the city has to come out and do stuff, and then it gets logged and billed and accounted for at a rate that might be more than some of us getting together as neighbors and helping each other out.
Yep.
Not necessarily ideal, but it's a country I'd like to live in as well. So keep your storm drain clear. And push things to the right. Now, when you say to the right, is if you're facing the street, push
Correct.
it to the right. That way you're not getting it piled back in. And I think that's just a simple trick, a hot take, if you will, that people might not actually think about. Yeah, if I push it to the left, the plow's just going to push it back in my driveway.
Yep, and as much as you can, put it on your front yard. You know, last year was a perfect example, but like people having issues getting out their driveways because the pile at the end of the driveway is so high. So don't just wait to, you get to the end of the driveway and pile it up. Put it on your lawn, and then that way it keeps it at a reasonable height, and you can see getting out of the driveway.
Absolutely, and again, a little bit of a trick if you're starting the winter season, throw it a little farther onto your lawn, so by the time
Exactly.
the season's getting on, you've got that access closer to your driveway. Now, I don't know if you're Irish or not, but Murphy's Law always tends to kick in as soon as I've cleaned my driveway. Here comes the plow.
Yep.
And of course, people have some choice words that sometimes go along with it, et cetera.
Absolutely.
I get it. We don't, in the city of Barrie, have a service for clearing the bottom of driveways. It's been a hot topic for many people. I see it being done elsewhere. I pay lots in taxes. Why don't we do it, Dave?
It's not that we can't do it. Huge budget. We've seen Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Mississauga lately. They're offering that service. If you look, they're probably send their residential plows out 10 times a year. Of that snowfall, maybe enough to send out the driveway clearing crews 3-5 times.
You're not exaggerating when you say 10 times, by the way, in Mississauga, for
Correct.
example. That's an actual number.
We checked with them the last time we did the pricing on that, and I think they were 9 times that they sent it out. So, with us being out 111 times, so now let's cut that in half and say 50 times. It's $5,000 per lane kilometer to do a snow lift. So if you're out 50 times and you're doing, 1,000, 1,600, kilometers of roadway, that adds up. And I believe the last time we did the pricing, it was in the several millions.
No, I was going to say millions of dollars for sure. Absolutely. Well, as you said, they put their plows out 10 times. Maybe they did it 3. We put ours out 100 times. We'd be doing it at least 30, right? Just on simple linear math in that regard, right? So.
Yep. And then you need equipment. So they're going out and they're buying backhoes with blades on them so they can clear the front of these driveways. So now you're, even if we did one backhoe per route, we're up to 15 backhoes. Now you need people to run them. So, there's another 15 people. If you have 2 shifts, so now you're 30 people. So it just, no pun intended, but it snowballs.
Yeah, fair enough. Absolutely. So with that in mind, again, I get the frustration, and we get a lot of snow, and therefore it is a burden. But we live here, whether it's by choice or by happenstance. We do live here. We should be getting this. This is not a surprise.
Nope.
Last year was a bit of an anomaly. Again, it would likely be cheaper, I'm guessing, for someone to hire a snow clearing service or a neighborhood teen, for example, youth who wants to make some pocket money to clear the end of your driveway than to actually put 1,600 kilometers times that many people on the tax bill.
Yep. Yeah, and there are volunteer organizations. They had an organization called Snow Angels. You can sign up with them if you're elderly, and they'll kind of connect you with a volunteer who will assist with clearing your snow.
So with that in mind, let's talk about clearing snow. Typically, I know you said we can go on the website, and certainly we can go on the website and just type in on the search bar winter control.
Yep, that works.
arterial roads are going to get cleared first, and probably more frequently. Let's just talk about expectations in terms of minimum snowfall and service levels.
Yep. Yeah, so we touched on it a little bit earlier. So, arterials, you're going to be bare pavement. We use salt in order to keep it that way. They go 24/7. If we move on into the residential areas, we're using mainly sand. So for traction, it's snow-packed. With those roads, we don't like to plow them during the day. There's a lot of people out, they're shoveling their driveways, they have their cars parked on the roadway, there's kids running around playing, so, that's when we send in the evening crew, the night crew. So, they'll start at 11 o'clock at night and they'll be out. So, when you get up in the morning, everything's nice and clear and hopefully you can get to work. You may have to get up a little bit earlier to shovel, but at least the roadways are passable.
Absolutely. Now, you did talk about the website, or I think I brought that up again. You've got a tool called Plow Tracker.
Plow Tracker, yeah. Yeah, and it's a wonderful tool. You can see exactly the amount of plows that we'll have out at any given time. I looked at it yesterday. There were 10 plows out, and they tell you when they were by your house as well. So there's a little color-coded legend on the bottom. It tells you if they've been out within the last 4 to 6 hours, 6 to 8, or 12 to 24.
Excellent. So when we come back from the break, let's get into a little bit more of do's and don'ts. And we mentioned right off the top of the show, obviously we've got the new waste collection protocols in place and the new bins, and how you are forecasting or put your crystal ball on for us and tell us how you think that's going to go. But stay with us. When we come back from the break, more from Dave Friary. We're still going to talk about winter. We're going to talk about some other things that we have seen historically that pop up during the winter, and how we're going to best handle it and best be prepared for the season ahead. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Barrie City on the Move, and we're talking winter control. We're talking all things snow and weather related with Dave Friary from the City of Barrie, Director of Operations. And Dave, I want to get into a little bit of the human side, and for those at home, I guess if there's one segment that I want everybody to pay attention to, I think this is definitely the one. It's the one where lives are at stake. It's the one where we want everybody at the end of the day going home safe. That's our residents, obviously, who we have a responsibility to as a corporation and taxpayers. But it's also the children who are going to and from school. They're having fun. Snow is exciting. They're building snow angels. And then, of course, it's also your operators who've got families, potentially likely families and loved ones to go home to at the end of the day. Let's get into some of the things that you've been doing this for a couple of years.
30?
Yeah. I wasn't going to say it. When I met you, you didn't have the full George Clooney going on, but 30 years, you've likely heard some stories, you've likely seen some stories, you've likely attended some events and incidents, et cetera. Yep. I'm not going to ask you to paint the gruesome picture, but turn that into a teachable moment, if you will. Well,
so the last 10 years or so, we've started having what we call snow school. So we bring in all the drivers, some of the contractors as well. We have a little bit of a truck rodeo. You get familiar with your equipment. We set up an obstacle course to get them sort of start thinking about winter. We have in-class sessions where they get their new routes. We even bring in somebody from HR to talk about work-life balance. It's tough, if you're working, 50, 60 hours a week, 12-hour shifts, it gets hard on your body. So sleep cycles, and we discuss that. So we're doing our best to kind of, inform our staff. They are told to go out and drive the route before, find any, raised manholes and things like that. When it comes to the kids, we absolutely tell them, be mindful, like road hockey, building forts at the end of the driveway in those large piles of snow. There are a lot of things that they have to be alert all the time while they're out. People in a rush trying to pass on the right, as I was saying. There's all kinds of distractions. There's all kinds of challenges while they're out there. But, we certainly let them know. And when they need a rest, there are times where, even with the 2 shifts, we have to send them home to rest for 8, 12 hours, and we call them back in, but you got to go and you got to diffuse and get some rest.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and we all hear the term white knuckle driving, but this is a professional driver with professional certification and designations. But not only are they driving a massive vehicle, but they're driving it with attachments on it, the blades on it. And there's no second chances in many of these instances. So just some things to keep in mind. You touched on, kids playing road hockey. Great, this is Canada. I hope we never put in rules in place that remove what it is to be a Canadian. So road hockey is part of our DNA. But then you also talked about, some forts, et cetera. And I was a kid growing up in the 70s. We had what seemed like more snow until last year, and I was like, this is what I remember. But the natural inclination is to go and build a snow fort and tunnel it and then pour water on it and ice it and make an igloo and all these different things that we used to do. And that's a natural thing to do, but you've got some guidance around those.
Yeah, just, try not to let your kids play in those areas. Anything that's a right of way close to the roadway, even the sidewalk plows, they're only going, 5 kilometers an hour. But, if you pop out from in behind a car or a snowbank, big snowblower on there, you got big turning blades. We just have to be mindful. We tell our operators, if you see somebody coming, stop, turn off the machine, let them pass. And it's why we prefer to do the work at night. It may be a little noisier, may disrupt your sleep a little bit, when you hear them going by, but, there's less people on the road and less chance of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was just thinking about it. Again, kids want to play. Events have happened in the past. We don't want to repeat those. I mean, obviously, that's something that not a conversation anyone would want to have with their family, but also the operators. I mean, they got to live with that as well. So just I want to be mindful of it. I actually wanted to dial it back a little bit for this segment to have that conversation. There are some bylaws in place December 1st until April 1st, I believe.
Yeah. So. There's no longer parking overnight. So downtown core has a little bit different hours, but whenever possible in the winter, if you can avoid parking on the roadway, please do. I know it's not always possible because you have to clear your own driveway, but we can still declare a winter event. So, here we are in November. If something happens, big snowfall prior to that, pay attention to local media. We will, let everybody know 24 hours notice. We're sending out the plows at night. Please do not park on the roadway, because we are coming.
And they will be ticketed, not necessarily towed.
Correct.
They will be ticketed, and of course, you're not going to have a job that's cleaned, right? Like that the roads won't be cleaned. Yeah,
and that's another challenge. So, narrower roadway, so where your car was parked isn't going to be cleared. So it's going to be a pile of snow at the end of, your driveway or your neighbor's driveway. The next time the plow comes by, may not appreciate that as well.
The other thing that I actually remember seeing on the odd occasion, it doesn't happen a lot, but again, the roads start to narrow as the sidewalks as the curb lane starts to get, more packed with snow. And then you got people potentially parking on both sides, and we want to make sure that we can get emergency vehicles through, for example.
Correct. So, if we do a large squall event or a big snowstorm, our first pass will be a single pass down the middle. And then that way it gets the roads opened up so the emergency vehicles can get down there. So, you may complain, they only went down one side of the street. Well, we do that on purpose for safety reasons. We got to get the emergency services in.
Right, absolutely. Let's talk sidewalks for a minute. The city of Barrie has been traditionally a bit of an anomaly by providing extra service in terms of clearing sidewalks. I understand from you, though, that's becoming more commonplace.
Correct.
There's a few reasons why, logistical as well as legal and you know, liability purposes, et cetera. But let's talk sidewalks in general, and then we'll get into some of the minutia.
Yep. So, you know, we've got primary and residential sidewalk routes as well. So, you know, primary's 24/7, and we'll just keep going until they're all clear. You know, they're maintained to a snowpack level. You know, unfortunately, with the way the machines are and not being able to use a ton of salt on the sidewalks, you're going to be snowpacked. And then you get, you know, warmer temperatures. It gets a little mushy. And, you know, people with wagons, scooters, things like that, it can be difficult to get around at times. So we will just continually get out there and keep going until we get down to that pavement. You know, we do provide that service. If the residents want to shovel in front of their house, that's fine. They can absolutely do that. We appreciate that. You know, a lot of people will put out those markers. You know, try not to put them right at the very edges of the sidewalk, because some of our sidewalks are the same size as our plow attachments and implements. So, you know, maybe a couple inches back. But, you know, if you want to do your sidewalk, we appreciate it, but for legal reasons, as you mentioned, we still have to come by and log that we've been by and we did our due diligence.
I just want to touch on something you mentioned there. I appreciate the pride of home ownership that many people have, curb appeal, all these different things that people look at. And again, this is not a surprise. This happens every single year. There's going to be an operator who takes out a piece of your sod, or maybe partially a part of your garden if your garden's on city property, for example. So you know, there's snow, and the operator's only as good as their memory recall and maybe the GPS, and maybe, you know, they might catch a bit of your sod. We do have a service, though, in the city of Barrie. Go ahead. I wouldn't recommend calling and complaining every single day from December through March, but we have a log system. Yeah,
and, you know, this time of year is, you know, the most challenging. You know, you have your sidewalk, which, you know, when it was built, the sod would be below the sidewalk. Now, you know, over years and years, your sod is encroaching onto the sidewalk, so it's getting narrower as well. Warmer temperatures, the ground isn't frozen yet, so that sod will peel up really easy. So we also don't have the windrows built up on the side of the sidewalks yet. So as you mentioned, knowing where the sidewalk is quite the game. You know, but we have that service. City of Barrie, call in, tell them you've had your sod rolled up. We'll either come by in the spring and replace it with topsoil and seed, or in some cases, if it's extremely bad, we would bring some sod out. We usually don't get sod until end of May, but some of those easier repairs, the dirt and the seed can be done in like April.
Got it. So folks can, and by the way, we talked about sort of the legal reasons, the slip and fall, that type of thing. The city does accept the responsibility as part of its operations that slip and fall can happen, which is why we're sending out the equipment, and there's technology to log that they've been there, et cetera, and at some point it's going to be, did we show reasonable effort to keep the sidewalks safe? Thaw, freeze is going to happen. Just real quick, to the best of you're not a lawyer, and I'm not going to hold you to this answer from a legal perspective, but best of your knowledge, residents would face no negative implications if they decided to get out and shovel. They're not hurting anything by helping out.
No, and if you could illustrate where the sidewalk is for our operators, they appreciate it. Especially, you know, if you lived in a place for a number of years, it may have a little bit of a dip or a turn in your sidewalk, and every year they tear up your lawn. You know, maybe some of those markers, or even, you know, go out and plow. Give them a head start.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with it, by the way, there are dollar store markers.
Correct.
They're orange. They're about 3 or 4 feet tall
Wooden
with a reflective
stakes.
wooden stakes, whatever it is.
Yep.
Yeah, mark it along. You're helping each other out. Just before we go to break, the sidewalk apparatus, it's got some different attachments for
Yep.
different purposes.
Yep.
Sometimes you'll see a snow blower on it, a blade, or a
blower.
broom.
Yeah, so we've got V blades, we've got straight blades, we've got blowers and brooms. So if you see them out this time of year, we like to use the brooms. And the reason is the sod. We don't want to rip it up. So, depending on the temperature, the amount of snow that's down, we have different implements that we can use. They all have GPS in them. We can also tell when they were around and, last time they were there. But depending on the weather, we have different machines we use.
Perfect. So when we come back from the break,
Yep.
Let's actually talk about what we learned over the years, what we're anticipating in terms of this year, but also maybe that significant weather event that we had with the ice storms, et cetera. We'll talk about a little bit about that, but what we can anticipate going forward for the season ahead. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Barrie City on the Move. Dave Friary and I have been talking about winter control. We've been talking about plows and sidewalks and salters and brine and sand and what you can expect and how you can help. But there are a couple things that we should talk about before we sort of wrap up this segment. And Dave, we teased it a couple of times. Obviously, we all know about it at this point. We've got the new bins. We got these new bins, and they're bigger bins. They came out for a reason. I know you've got cross-training and you know the people, the colleagues that you work with. These bins were brought for a reason, obviously, to help out with the operators who get
Correct.
the repetitive strain injuries and things like that. We've now got robotic arms that help lift, et cetera. But these bins are a little bit bigger than traditionally, and how are we gonna deal with them this winter?
Well, there shouldn't be a lot of difference from where you put out your old garbage cans or recycling bin. They should be on your side of the boulevard, and that's to allow us to get the as much coverage as we can with our plows, push the snow as back as far as we can. Where to put them? You can, on your boulevard, shovel a small patch and put them off to the side. Or, when you leave in the morning, just drag them out, pull your car out onto the roadway, leave them in your driveway, and then when you get home, you do have to park and, move them back in, and then back in the driveway. It may take you another 2-3 minutes, but, at least your cans are going to be there when you get home.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think we should know, some people traditionally did put their recycling up on the snowbank. That was never an approved method, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Anything over, I believe it's like 24 inches, because of the lifting and the operators, the repetitive strain, sore backs, things like that. So a lot of times they would just leave if you piled them on top of your snowbank.
Okay, so don't put them on your snowbank.
Correct.
Certainly not these large cans. I get it. It's not convenient, especially if you've got a single lane driveway. The doctor's prescription or recommended action is try and give yourself an extra 2 to 3 minutes just to do it. I know it's not ideal, certainly if you're not on a major artery or something like that, but we're going to be working with it. This is the expected work. Okay, good. Now we talked about clearing the right side if you're looking from your driveway out to the street, clear a little bit extra, push it that way. So we've talked about cans, we've talked about recycling. It's going to be business as usual. You still want to keep 2 feet in between, I think they said, your larger cans, your larger bins. So that's something that people are going to have to be mindful. I guess the point is plan now. How are you going to make it work? Yeah,
you don't want to be getting up on garbage day and trying to figure out where to put them. There's no room. And if you have shoveled your driveway, that's always a good option.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've covered that. One of the other things that we contend with as well, the infamous potholes. I mean, first of all, 10 seconds or less or whatever, how do we get potholes?
Freeze thaw. You get little cracks, little holes. The water during the day, snow will melt during the day, go into those cracks. At night, you get the freezing temperatures, ice expands, and then it pop. So we've got some newer technology. So back in we still use coal patch. So that's the temporary, just sort of granular with tar on it. So we still use that. We've also got 2 small asphalt plants on a trailer. So basically it uses old asphalt, heats it up, rejuvenates it, and it lasts a little bit longer than say sort of that the coal patch. If you see them, we encourage residents to report it to the City of Barrie. We're out there, year-round, and we have crews in. We'll bring them in on weekends if we have to fill potholes. So we appreciate any information from the residents on that, and we have data showing we're filling 17,000 potholes a year. So we're out there a lot.
That is, and you did touch on data. You collect a lot of data. So you've got Plow Tracker, you got the Google. You know exactly where you've been and where you're going and how often you've been there, et cetera. Data plays a huge role.
Absolutely.
No matter how good the data is, though, it's still going to come up to cooperation, residents, driver capability, that kind of thing. Let's switch gears just a little bit, though. One of the things that we can't always predict, and that freeze thaw as well that you talked about, is broken water mains. Yeah,
anytime you get temperature differences and contracting and aging infrastructure as well. So, they happen. We work with our partners in the water department. They will tell us where a water main is, and especially during winter months, what we'll do is we'll close the road down. To make sure any of the water that gets onto the roadway isn't freezing and turning into a skating rink. So, they'll make the repairs, they'll inform us that they're complete, and, before we reopen the roadway, we'll send a sander or a salter there just to ensure that, everything is safe for the residents.
Now, ultimately, safe roads, I almost feel like that Smokey the Bear guy, but it's everybody's responsibility. We haven't talked about winter tires. What do you know about tires, Dave?
The newer technology, so it's a softer compound. So it's not just about the traction. People think it's all about being able to get up the hill. It's not all about that. It's your stopping distance. So with the softer compounds, they stop a lot quicker. In the last couple of years, they've got all-weather tires. So they do have that little snowflake on them. You're still eligible for insurance rebates, but get something on there. And depending on where you're driving, you may want to plan ahead. So if you know where it's snowing and you got to get up the Ann Street Hill, well, maybe instead of doing that, you go up Wellington, up and around. So planning ahead.
We just rebuilt Ann Street. You didn't make it more level?
No, it's not more level. It's still a hill. And we have the Dundonald Hill, and people who've lived here for a number of years know the bigger hills, and it's winter. Maybe avoid them.
A quick heads up, though, we do not in this province, certainly not in this area of the province, allow for tires with studs on them. Correct?
Correct. I believe that the farthest south you can come is Parry Sound.
And what about chains? Same thing?
Same thing, yeah.
Same thing. Okay, they will wreck the roads, basically, mess up our roads. Okay, so we've talked about technology, we've talked about water mains, we've talked about the hills, salt combinations, et cetera. You did touch on skating rinks, though. I know this may or may not be exactly what we were talking about, but it's winter. It's winter.
It's not all doom and gloom. There's the Christmas season coming. We do have our partners in recreation do have 2 refrigerated rinks, one down by Centennial and the other one at City Hall, so they can start up a little earlier. We've got 27, 28 volunteer rinks, so depending on the temperatures, I know some years it's been too warm, it's been a challenge, we get them built, and next thing you know, you get a thaw and they're gone. But if you're looking to get in as a volunteer for these rinks, there's information on the website. Please contact us. Usually what happens then is we'll go out and help you start. So we'll get a plow out there and move some of the snow around, assist you with the flooding. There's only a certain amount of parks that have hydrants that we can allow this. Some don't, and some of the new ones are getting those hydrants in, so they can do those things. And we enjoy it when the people get involved and help us out. So there's information on the website. I can tell you that we'll be doing our cross-country ski trails again in Sunnydale Park. So it's free to everybody. We've got some new equipment to help groom those trails. So it's not all hibernate and stay inside until April. Get out and enjoy the weather. Santa Claus is coming, and
Are you going to have people in the parade?
Well, if you consider sweepers after the parade, we will have people. So we are in charge of sort of cleaning up. So we assist with the road closures, and after they're done, you'll see a number of street sweepers going by, cleaning up, taking out any extra, garbage, recycling, things like that.
So speaking of the downtown core, and I know we're talking a little bit of parks as well. I mean, you did mention that you keep the trails going along the waterfront, et cetera. Garbage collection, does that stop during the winter?
Oh, no. It's all, 365. So, it'll still continue. They've got a little bit different program for their waste control, but even, if you look at Meridian Square, it was decided that it is going to be maintained all year round. So that should be maintained as almost like a giant sidewalk. So we'll go down and we'll put a bit of ice melt down. We'll ensure that it's open and clear for people to use year round.
Now, speaking of the downtown, and as you mentioned in the BIA, they do have a few different bylaws or modifications to the bylaws, maybe extended hours for parking because supporting the local proprietors, et cetera. But there have been on occasion those who found themselves with a citation or a warning notice on their storefront. What are the rules around snow clearing in the downtown?
They have to be cleared, so it's the responsibility of the shop owner or property owner to have it cleared by 10 o'clock. Put down a little bit of snow melt. The area in front of your store is for people to come in and out or walk by. So that's one of the bylaws that we have. With that, we also do snow lifts downtown where we don't do snow lifts in some of the other areas of town. So when the snow gets about 24 to 30 inches high, on the snowbanks. In the snowbanks, we'll physically go out and we'll remove all the snow from the downtown core.
So different levels of service, some enhancements and some additional responsibilities.
Correct.
But if you are a store owner, either do it yourself or hire someone to do it is the guidance along that. Lastly, before we go, we've got a lot of, this is our city, we're bisected by the 400. We've got a lot of interchanges, I think 6 or something like that, different interchanges. Bridges also, overpasses, et cetera. Things we need to be mindful of, 30 seconds or less?
Yeah, just patience, plan ahead, and that's basically it.
But they do freeze or thaw at a different rate, I think?
Well, bridge decks, so we do the bridge decks on top and over top of the Highway 400. So we have a separate crew that actually goes out and does Ann Street, for example, St. Vincent. They will freeze a little bit quicker. So we're mindful of that. So we'll actually go in and we'll shovel the sidewalks. We'll put down some extra salt on those areas as well, because the air can get underneath it, gets a little cooler. But we have a whole crew that does intersections and bridge decks.
Excellent. Well, with that in mind, I couldn't have timed it any better. Dave, I do want to thank you for taking the time. Wish all the best to your crew, obviously for a safe season. And I want to thank you for joining me on Barrie City on the Move. And for you at home, I wish you all the best. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again next time.